Ranking member if they have any opening comments.
Good morning, everyone. Nothing from me. I think there's a busy time up here and lots of meetings going on, but it's wonderful to see so many folks today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Representative Card.
Nothing much from me. Just looking forward to the public hearing, and that's about it.
All right, thank you. So the first speaker, I think it looks like all of our speakers are in person. Great. So first speaker, we have Walter Klum. Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. It's good to be here. My name is Walter Glum. I am a parent of a man who has Down syndrome and receives services from DDS. I am also the executive director of the Connecticut Council on Developmental Disabilities. And I'm here in support of Committee Bill 6487. You have my written testimony. I'll just summarize. The changes are coming to Medicaid. We know this, right? I mean, we know within the state, even before the things that are happening in Washington right now, there was a need to make some corrections in Medicaid spending. And now with the changes at the federal level, it's even more acute. Therefore, this type of study is essential. We need to have a better understanding, a more granular understanding of what it's costing to serve all of our folks. And not everybody's the same. So there's a number of things in this bill that I want to highlight, and I have a few questions. My first concern is that the bill appears to focus solely on 24/7 residential options, which in DDS would mainly be the CLAs and then the state facilities. I encourage you to expand that, okay? CLAs are not the main option going forward for residential services. Most people now are getting served in a supported living arrangement where they rent a space from a third party and they receive so-called individualized home supports, IHS services. I think that model, it's essential that that model at least be included in this alongside the CLAs so you can see that cost comparison. I would also encourage you to expand this to cover all DDS services, including people who are living at home and getting day services, because people are doing a variety of creative things to provide de facto 24/7, supports, mixing DDS services, waiver services, and CFC, for example. So I think, I hope the study, when it gets done, will be more than just looking at DDS CLAs and state facilities. Because these other options, I think, are the ones that, particularly the supported living, are the ones that are going to dominate going forward. So that's my first one. My second point, I think others are going to speak to this. Be careful that you consider all costs and that you do apples to apples comparisons, especially between state and private providers. Okay, and in there, when you do the state, you need to capture indirect and fringe costs, which of course are buried in the what you're paying the private providers. And to the extent that you cover day and people who are not on the comprehensive waiver, there are a lot of folks these days getting part of their services in so-called one-time services that are not, they're one-time, but they're de facto annualized. They just continually get renewed. Those costs are real and they need to be counted. So making sure that you cover all the costs. I also have a question, a concern about the quality metrics that are going to be used in your quality comparisons. Who's going to determine what those metrics are and who's going to assess them? DDS actually has fairly limited, in my opinion, metrics right now on quality. They don't, for example, look much at quality of life of individuals and so forth. And I'm wondering if you're going to engage stakeholders, or I would encourage you to engage stakeholders in determining what metrics are going to be assessed in comparing quality between different settings. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we open it up to questions. Representative David.
Thank you very much, Walter, for testifying today. I know there was a couple folks that asked, why have the auditors do this review? I know this review was done 10 plus years ago in the old PRI setting, which we don't have right now. With your sort of knowledge and where the expertise might lie, do you think the auditors of public accounts are the best folks to manage this in connection with OPM?
Oh, the answer is yes. Absolutely. Because we need this done to an objective standard. And in part because of my opening comments about, what's going on with Medicaid. I mean, as you know, there are numerous discussions going on both in this building and within the administration about what are we going to do about Medicaid costs, not just the DDS waiver programs, but more broadly. And I think that's important. The way we have our services siloed, cost comparisons between, for example, long-term care for older adults and the long-term care that's offered by DDS on their waivers for people who are younger. Those can be difficult because you have different departments, you have different accounting systems, and I think having the auditor of public accounts is a useful step, I would think, in providing some kind of standard for comparison, because sooner or later, we're going to have to start looking at hopefully, looking across silos. And, either are there best practices we can share or things that can be, somehow, dare I say, consolidated. And to do that, I think you need someone who's outside the normal departmental structure to do that, I would think. So my answer to your question in short is yes, I think it is appropriate to have the auditor do this work.
Thank you. I also wanted to kind of talk about your comment about expanding this to day services as well. I know when I was thinking through this bill and looking what was done in the past with the PRI and the time window that we were looking to get an answer being February of next year so we can act on it next legislative cycle. I think having, kind of a smaller sort of focus. Right now, there's such a need for residential services, and I think there's needs everywhere. But when we're looking at this, I think this is kind of a two-step approach, and so that was one of the kind of key focuses. And yes, please. Is your microphone on, sir? Thank you.
It was.
No, I was gonna say it was on before.
I think there was I understand the need, to make this lean and so you can get it done. And if you go that route, again, I hope at least you will include the supportive housing options in the study, if not all the day programs. But when it comes to so-called 24/7 care, I would point out that some of the day options, particularly the employment options, which of course the council would be promoting, are among the most cost-effective daycare you can get, right? I mean, when a person's working somewhere in competitive integrated employment, you're not paying for that. They're paying you, right? So, somewhere along the line, I hope we can look at those comparisons and those trade-offs. But if you want to focus this initially just on residential, I understand that. But then please include the IHS, individualized supports in supportive housing as part of the study.
Thank you. I would love to do it all, but we have so many constraints, and also we don't know what's coming down from the feds. But we need to move in the right direction, and I think this, hopefully, you feel like this bill does that to start that process. Great. Well, thank you so much. Sorry.
Okay. I did have a couple of questions as well, but let me ask our ranking member and committee members. So I had two questions for you. One on the day services. You said there are creative ways that that's being put together. Can you expand on that a little bit? Or how are people putting together these day service packages? Because I'm thinking of all the components that go into an audit. Like, is it feasible to actually be able to have oversight in all those pieces? And being less familiar with this, if you can share with me what some of those packages look like. You said the creative ways of making sure care is provided
Well, I
in
would
those
say,
non-residential contexts.
for a start within DDS, use of individualized day. Right? I mean, I don't think we have time here to go through the whole menu of DDS options, but individualized day gives family a lot of flexibility on where their family member is going to be and who's going to be serving them. Okay, and then the mix of agency supports and self-directed, self-hired supports would be another example. And then when you put CFC, Community First Choice, into the mix, it becomes even more interesting. And there are individuals who receive both DDS, a combination of DDS waiver services and Community First Choice, which is not a waiver service, right? That's Medicaid state plan. So, you can have a situation where you have a mix of CFC, which is necessarily self-directed, self-hired, and waiver supports, which may come from an agency or a combination of agency and self-hired supports, working with the individual in a variety of settings. And that's, from there it gets, we could talk all afternoon about all the different ways to do that. But, when you do that, you can, you put together numbers of hours, plus some family time, to see that the individual is always in a safe and healthy, healthy place. It's not a set piece program. It's, very individualized, which is what we want, right? I know that's the intent of the department. It's certainly what the council supports, is individualized, customized programming for everybody.
Thank you. And then, you mentioned we're struggling with this with the Special Education Committee when it comes to quality and assessing reasonableness. I would say, what's reasonable when it comes to what providers are charging for their services? What are some metrics? And I think that would be difficult for the auditors without having metrics around that. So is there a best practice? You mentioned that somebody should put together a best practice. Is there a best practices manual anywhere? And what would the metrics be that you would suggest?
I mean, first of all, I'd be happy to touch base with my counterparts in other states, right? There's one of me in every state and territory. And some states, have more quality manuals, more specific quality standards, I think, than we do. So I'd be happy to offer that. Okay. But then within Connecticut, for a start, in DDS, each individual has an individual plan. And for some years now, the foundation of that individual plan is a tool called Charting the Life Course, which I'm proud to say the council had a part in bringing to Connecticut many, many years ago. So in creating the individual plan, there's a process of working with the individual in this with this Charting Life Course tool to determine what are your aspirations, what are your goals, what are your challenges, what mix of services and supports do you need to get from here to there. And that all gets documented in the individual plan, okay? I don't believe that those elements, the pieces in the individual plan that are created today, are reflected on the other side of DDS, the QSR and the quality system. Okay, DDS, there's a customer-facing side, which is the case management that works with individuals on their individual plans. Then there's a resource management side and the quality side, which looks at quality of services by the providers. I think for a start, we ought to be reflecting the goals and objectives and aspirations, if you will, that are in the individual plan in quality measures at the providers. So that would be a start, is taking a look at how do you do that. And I know that DDS internally has been doing a lot of work to analyze their individual plans to see on the case management side, to the extent do they reflect the aspirations and the desires of the individual and so forth. But I don't believe, and the commissioner can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that the content of the individual plan is reflected in the quality metrics at the provider. And I think that would be a really good start right there.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Anyone online? Any committee members? Nope. All right. Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, and next we have Thomas Fiorentino from ARC Connecticut.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to be here in person rather than sitting in front of my laptop.
Yes.
I'm here on behalf of the ARC Connecticut. I'm a member of the board and also as a parent, just like Walt. I have an adult son with Down syndrome who receives services through DDS. I support this bill and I congratulate the committee on raising this because I think it's really, really important that we have a really good grasp on the relative costs of the two systems, the nonprofit system that provides the vast majority of services in the state, it's called the public side. As Representative Dathan noted, this has been studied by PRI. I suspect things have changed. I suspect, though, that they've changed in a way that makes the conclusion of PRI even more salient, which was it's unsustainable. The public option is just unsustainable. I don't really know why, but I can just look at the numbers and you can see that the costs on the state side are staggering. Doesn't begin to describe how expensive the state system is. And one technical thing I wanted to say for the folks that when hopefully this bill passes, they need to make sure that they look at the state employee retirement system contribution when they're determining costs. Just as an example, the top earner at DDS in the entry-level position of developmental service worker 1. Oh, so embarrassing. I'm so sorry, folks. And it's spam. That person, the cost to the state for her SERS, for her state employee contribution, was $133,000 a year. The top 15 earners, and remember, folks, the entry level position, so the hands-on direct care people, the top 15 all cost the state when you put in the SERS contribution over $240,000 a year. This cannot be a competitive system. And why it's so concerning and upsetting is it's a pool, right? It's a pool of money. There's only so much to go around. With Medicaid changes, maybe even less to go around. When one sector is taking such a disproportionate share, it's hurting the other people in the system. It's doing measurable harm to them, and it needs to stop. So one thing I wanted to say, it's great to do the study, but in the meantime, there's still a responsibility to rein in what's going on. The overtime last year, DDS has fewer than 400 people in its care. It was about $40 million in overtime or $100,000 per person per year served. Now, I want to caveat, we don't have the numbers on. They're also doing respite care. That's going to bring those numbers down somewhat, okay? And they have some other programs that those workers are involved in. So I want to be fair to DDS, but I think it's going to bring it down marginally. The point is still the same. It's a hugely expensive system that we can't afford, and members of my community are victims of it. So the longer that goes, and there are interim steps we can take. The nonprofit sector is being told constantly, tighten your belts. You can do better. Hey, sorry, there's no money. Do what you can. No, they can't. It's starved. It's collapsing. If somebody has seen a similar directive to the public side, share it with me because I have never seen it. And as a result, that system's costs, people talk about Southbury Training School, but it's not that much of an outlier. The regional centers are about the same. Over $600,000 per person per year for the staff. Forgive me if on behalf of my community, I say to you, what are we doing? Can't we, I'm not saying get rid of, I'm just saying, can't we do a little better job managing those folks so that there's some money left over to go into where most of the services are provided? And the last thing I want to say, there's this pernicious myth out there that only the state and institutions can serve certain people. Folks, that's like my coming to you and saying, hey, I know a lot of people say the world's round. Okay, but I'm hearing that there's some people that say it's flat, so what? We can't, you want to argue about, is Diana Taurasi a better ball player than Paige Beckers? We can argue. But we can't argue about this. Many states have no institutions and still serve these folks. This myth that only the state can serve people in an institutional setting because of their high level of needs, it isn't true. In the state, the commissioner of DDS would tell you the same thing, because at Southbury, they did an extensive study of every person there to determine, can they live in the community? And the overwhelming answer was yes, with the exception of some folks on hospice and some very, very, very complicated medical. Everybody else could live in the community. We've answered that question. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, we're going to die. We got to fight for this hill again. We've already answered that question. So in your other committees, when that's going around, well, maybe, no, that's not true. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Folks.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Pianto. Let me see if there are questions from my co-chair, my good co-chair.
Thank you so much. And it's good to see you two in person. I appreciate you being here. I think, you highlighted some of the reasons why this has been a priority for me when we see, like you have said, $250,000, $300,000 for the state to have someone in residential services, where in the private sector, nonprofit sector, we're seeing, 150 or less. And that's just kind of rough numbers. And I think the meaning behind this bill is to kind of really dig into that. There are opportunities. We have a waiting list. We have people who need residential services. And I think you highlighted something that I think was really important, because in talking about the level of need, we hear a lot that, the state is managing the highest level of need. In your experience, based on, members of the ARC, what kind of level of need are the nonprofits working with?
They are serving all levels of need and could serve more on the higher end, but the money has to be there. You cannot, a nonprofit won't take somebody if the state's position is going to be, you got to do it for 100. You got to do it for something that they know they can't do it for. It's not safe. So even though the relative cost would still be lower in the nonprofit, it's got to rise. It's got to get to a certain level. But I would say, because we have better, I think, experientially, when you look at other states, right, that have gotten rid of all of their institutions, folks they're able to be served in the community no matter what their level of need. The supports have to be there, though. And what I would say to you is, year after year of starving this system, the nonprofit system has damaged it. And we have to reverse that. And I just want to say, and I know this is a little bit tangential, but I know it would bother you, so I want to share it with you because I don't want to be the only one bothered. The overwhelming majority of people who are direct service providers in the nonprofit sector are people of color. They are consigned to poverty wages. Many of them have their families on state support. State's paying, through the back door, one won't pay through the front door. And some of them are actually getting donations of food from area food banks, because $17, $18, $19 an hour, you can't make it in Connecticut on those wages. So, it's a result again of this. If you think about this pie, right? And it's just cut wrong.
You kind of read my mind for the next point. Was we hear about nonprofits really having a difficult time retaining star workers.
Yeah.
And I think, you talked about sort of the average hourly rate. And then when you think about how much they could make working for the state, it also, risks continuing of care. And I think particularly in people who might be a bit more medically fragile, to have that same continuum of care, to understand the nuances of a person, the habits and things like that, it keeps the residents more at rest. So. you know,
Yeah,
I think you
turnover,
said-
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Turnover can be extremely hard on some of our folks. So imagine it's where you live. It's your, if you have lucky enough to have a placement. And the next thing you know, the worker that you had a relationship, they're gone. New one's there. 3 months later, they're gone. And they're gone in large part because they get better paying jobs. I was about to say better jobs. They're not better jobs but they're better paying. One person, and she testified on Family Hearing Day, she said to me, I have friends who get paid more to care for boxes at Amazon than I get paid to care for people in the place where I work, the provider where I work. That's a fact. And you're not going to end up on the abuse and neglect registry if something goes wrong at Amazon or Target or Stop and Shop. So there's a lot of pressure on these folks to be on the top of their. One said to me, she said, I can't come to work in a bad mood. I can't do it. Hey, in Amazon, I'm in a bad mood. Maybe I push the box a little bit harder, right? When I put it up, I don't know what they do in Amazon, but I'm just saying, right? It's a job that demands a huge amount. We don't value it. We don't respect it. We don't respect the workers, because if we did, we wouldn't pay them $18 an hour. But to your point, Representative Dathan, the turnover not only is bad for the staff, for the entity, for the nonprofit. That means all that training you did just went out the window. You got to retrain. All that money, and it costs them money, is gone, and they got to start over again. So some stability in this system. We have models. The personal care attendant contract that the state reached last year with people doing exactly the same work, largely within, for example, the community first choice program. That's a good model. Their wages are substantially higher over what our folks are getting. All we're saying is, hey, it's the same work. Not saying pay them the same as the state side, because that's out of reach. But something in between, where it's something where they're not, every time they go to Stop and Shop and they see on the door, workers wanted $24 an hour. It's like, I could get paid more working at Stop and Shop than I can at the group home I work at. So, though, I know you appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I know we're trying to tackle this in a lot of different
Yes, ma'am.
ways. And I talk a lot about the benefits cliff, because that is
Yeah.
a huge aspect here as well. And that's really why I think this study is important, because we really need to know how we can make this a sustainable, thoughtful model. I appreciate your testimony. Did you submit any written testimony?
I didn't. I will. I
Okay, if you
apologize.
would, that would be
Yes,
great.
ma'am.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. For any other questions? Oh, one more question, Senator Chicarella.
Thank you. Just a couple of brief comments. I want to thank you for coming today and advocating for those who need it. Not only the individuals that are under the care of these great nonprofits that do so much with so little. I've been working with many of my constituents that have loved ones with intellectual disabilities, and they may be in the group homes or some of the day programs. And I've toured a bunch of these in
Good for
North
you.
Haven, and saw all the great work they're doing with so little. And we, after touring the area and seeing the process, had a conversation with the individuals that are running the day program. And they said just that. They went over those numbers that are alarming, the amount of money that a state employee is getting paid to provide the service. Some of those people are actually working from home too. They were pointing out and getting a lot of that overtime. And I'm sure there's administrative work, and there may be a reasonable explanation for it. But that's why this is so important. We have other challenges in this area. We have a new financial institution that seems to be having some challenges. The new FI that's helping out is really creating some additional challenges. So I think it is important. I think our auditors will do a great job. I just hope that they have the resources, because this is a heavy load of information to really go through and be able to give it the attention it needs. I'm confident in the auditors to be able to do it, but we need to make sure we're giving them the resources to do it, because it is so important for the points that you made. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Chicarella. Any other comments or questions? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our final speaker on the list, Ben Shagan.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ben Shakin. I'm the Director of Government Relations at the Connecticut Community Nonprofit Alliance. The Alliance is the statewide association that represents community providers of services to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the DDS system. I'm here to also testify in support of House the bill on your agenda. I just wanted to point out that as of the last information report we have from DDS, which was from September, of the 4,549 people with IDD that are currently being served in 24/7 residential settings, 4,184 of them, or 92%, are in community-based settings that are operated by nonprofit providers. Only 138 live in state-operated group homes. State still operates a small handful of these community-based sites, and the remaining 226 in state operated care are being served in DDS-operated institutions, 120 at the regional centers and 106 at Southbury Training School. I'm sure those numbers are a little different now. That's just the last public-facing report. When the last cost comparison data that we have was released, which was looking at fiscal year 2010, more than 1,000 people with intellectual and developmental disabilities lived in state-operated settings, and so that number has shrunk by about 2/3. Then the study found a significant cost disparity and between the state and public and private settings. And so we really encourage the legislature to find out this information. I don't want to talk about sort of what you might do with that information today, but it's really important that we have it. There really hasn't been any updates to it since then. A number of groups inside and outside of state government have used it to make policy recommendations. The most recent one being the Boston Consulting Group that Governor Lamont hired to evaluate state government when he was elected. But they too were using data that at that point was 7 or 8 years old. And so we think it's a really good idea to update the study. I saw some of the other testimonies sort of talking, are the auditors the right entity? We've supported in this committee and in the Government Administration and Elections Committee proposals to reestablish the legislature's Program Review and Investigation Committee, but we do think it's important to get this information, whether or not those proposals move forward. And then there was a conversation earlier, just to answer a question or provide some context about how to measure quality. And I think I agree that there's a lot of different ways that you could look at quality. What I'll just say is the study 15 years ago, what they looked at was they reviewed 17 state operated homes that had recently been converted to nonprofit operation, meaning the state gave the house to a nonprofit or sold the house to a nonprofit and said, okay, you take services over here. And so they looked at the inspections of those homes basically when they were in state service, and then looked at them when they were in nonprofit services, and looked at what deficiencies were noted basically by the health inspectors or public health by DDS. And they found then that only 13% of the nonprofits' homes were cited for plan of correction deficiencies, while 38% of state homes were cited. That's just one way to look at it, and those inspections certainly focus almost entirely on physical plant, and not so much on what Walt was talking about earlier in terms of quality of life for the people served. I would say that's probably something else that's changed significantly since 2010, meaning that there's a significant progression, I guess you could say, of how DDS measures the quality of services beyond just what happens in the place, what is the quality of the paint in the facility itself, but what is the quality of life of people being served. Anyway, I'm happy to take any questions, but we are glad to support this bill and support getting this information to you, the legislature, and to the public.
Great. Thank you so much for following up on those questions that already came out today. That was really very, very helpful. Let me ask my good co-chair if she has any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shakin, and appreciate all the stats that you put inside your written testimony. Very, very helpful. In terms of going back to the question about who's the right entity to do this, if it wasn't the auditors of public accounts, who would you suggest to do this?
I think that's a very good question that you are probably in a better place than me to answer. I will just say the legislature often asks for information from a variety of different places. This committee obviously has cognizance over the auditors of public accounts. Often information like this is asked, that the legislature just asks the executive branch directly to provide the information. And certainly while I'm sure they would say that there would be a cost to doing that they would be able to provide it. One of the things that we have said as we have supported the reestablishment of the PRI committee is that the number of studies and task force that come out of the General Assembly that direct the executive branch usually to deliver a comprehensive report with a lot of information to you could theoretically be reduced if the legislature had its own ability to do its own review and investigation of state programs. And there's often a push and pull between the legislature and the executive branch about the burden, legitimate burden that the level of those task forces and studies place on executive branch agencies to provide information, often in a compressed time frame. And so it's kind of a non-answer to your question, but I think that certainly the executive branch has access to this information and could analyze the cost, and the auditors could also get that information.
Thanks for that answer. Are you aware of any other states that have done such studies, or I know there's other nonprofits alliances in other parts of the country. Is there anything that folks know of that kind of look at these sort of costs?
I'm not aware directly. I think it's important to understand that, and this isn't necessarily the fault of Connecticut, but our program doesn't really compare easily to the other IDD waiver services programs across the country. I'm not sure that any of them compare super easily to each other. This is a Medicaid waiver service. And so by sort of definition in federal law, each state sets theirs up a little differently. But we saw in the rate study, the Medicaid rate study that DSS published earlier this year, that the consultant that did that study was not able to find another state or benchmark our services against the benchmark states that they looked at in a way to compare the adequacy of the rates. And so they provided some fairly detailed analysis of our home and community-based services waiver, but ultimately said we can't find, within the scope of this study, at least, we can't find another state where we can compare ourselves to on the rate side. And I think the same is true across the system in terms of service design, in terms of whether or not the state provides direct services directly to clients, and if they do, whether nonprofits are or community providers are involved at all. All of that stuff is totally different on a state-by-state basis.
That's useful. Thank you. In terms of the questions around kind of trying to figure out issues that we have comparing the state's received services versus private nonprofit services and the level of need. As we've heard kind of anecdotally in discussions that the state needs to manage the higher level need. Asked this question of Mr. Glom earlier. In your alliance, what sort of level of need are serviced within your nonprofits?
Nonprofit providers serve individuals at the highest level of need and have been for decades. So the reduction in this sort of state operated census, even since FY10 in the last 15 years, is part of the state's ongoing and longstanding practice of moving people who can receive services into the community from state operated institutions. And so some of the reduction has been because the state had continued in the last governor's administration, at least, to convert its remaining group homes into nonprofit service. But most of the reduction is in the institutional levels of care, or at least part of the reduction is. And so nonprofits have been serving people with the highest level of need in the community successfully since the movement to deinstitutionalize people began in the 1960s. And as folks before me have said, as long as they are adequately resourced, they can provide the services and supports that people need in a community-based setting. I mean, if you think about it, in terms of the other big home and community-based services that the state offers, so home care for people who are elderly, again, with the adequate resources, people even with the highest and most complicated medical needs can age in place in their homes. They don't need a nursing home as long as they're resourced. And the same is true for people with complicated medical and behavioral needs and intellectual disabilities. They don't need to be in an institution to be supported. Homes are able to be made accessible from a physical standpoint. Staffing levels are able to be maintained that can support people at the same level that they might be supported in an institution. And then it'll happen in one's own home with access to the community, better access to the community.
Thank you. And my last question is the regional centers that DDS operates in comparison to a nonprofit. Can you please describe how a person receiving services in each of those settings might be different?
So there are 3 regional centers left. The state reduced the number of regional centers. Geez, probably about almost 10 years ago now. This was something that happened in the sort of late days of the Malloy administration. They are classified as intermediate care facilities, technically. So the same classification that that sort of nursing home levels of care would have. There are nonprofit intermediate care facilities as well. The nonprofit ones tend to be slightly larger than a group home, so like 8 or 12 people living in it instead of 3 to 6. I'm not sure exactly what the services look like or what each of the regional centers look like. I've never been to one. It's probably a question better asked of DDS than of me. But I do know that people who receive services there are also able to be served in the community, and many of them have moved from those centers into the community over the years.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's it, but for me, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Representative Dathan. Are there any further comments or questions from the committee? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's our last speaker. Are there any speakers in the room that have submitted testimony that are interested in expounding on that testimony, or that would just like to speak today? Yes. Great. Mr. Minor. And you know the process. You identify yourself and provide your testimony. Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Craig Minor. I'm from the Auditors of Public Accounts, and I'm one half of the team of Garagosian and Minor, representing 126 employees that work for the agency. We did submit testimony, and we both felt it was important to try and have someone here to get a sense of what the testimony might be as it compares to what the language of the bill says. And I think what I've heard today is that there's a keen interest on expanding, or at least making clear, that the parameters within the legislation don't seem to fit the desire of some individuals that are very much advocates for the legislation. Our testimony hasn't changed, that for us to work in conjunction with OPM in this way would be unusual and probably not something that would be accepted within the guidelines of accounting practices. We still maintain that if OPM were to undertake that responsibility, and then we would come in and opine on whether we thought it was done well, hit the target, that certainly is something that we generally do. We do also do these types of audits, and then so far, at least in my tenure here with the agency, the concern that we have is more often deadlines. Every one of our auditors is currently engaged in an audit. And so whether that audit might rise to the level of something that we think is worthy or you think is worthy is always a matter of debate, but I'll just give you a couple of highlights. DCF, children missing from care. DCJ, prosecutor-led diversion practices for family violence offenders. Special education, private providers. We're finishing something on angel investors, and then from there, we have OEC childcare monitoring, special education, local education authorities, a couple on agriculture, Governor's Council on Compliance for DOAG. So we try to have tasks in the pipeline so that they can be fleshed out. The question would become, without additional staffing, which of these gets knocked off the board, and how clear can we be about the tasking of this assignment once it becomes law? So the deadline is, quite honestly, John and I have talked about it a number of times with staff. It's going to be very hard to achieve what I think the committee is looking for and the advocates are looking for within that time period. You can always take a look at numbers, but just as long as I've been here today, it seems as though there's an interest in looking at things in a greater depth. When you start talking about, are we actually meeting what the intentions of the legislation was when we initially established all the parameters of providing services to this population? That's very different from what the costs are, because we can all take salaries, we can take benefits, we can take retirement, all those things we can put in a column that seem to be readily available already. So I think we're here to figuratively to, offer our assistance in trying to find a solution. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I would say that the deadline is problematic in terms of having something for you, and working in the way it's described in the bill with OPM is somewhat problematic in terms of our autonomy. And so we would want to talk further about those things.
Thank you, Ms. Reiner. And so your written testimony suggests, is it sufficient for OPM on its own to do the periodic reviews, as mentioned, in your opinion?
Well, I think that was our opinion. It's certain they have access to a lot of information just like we do. They can do comparative analysis with costs because they know from a budgeting perspective what they're paying for private providers and public providers for, I will say, the same service, even though I freely admit that I don't know whether the services are exactly the same, right? So we think they have the expertise to do that. And then if there's some other evaluation that you would like us to do, we certainly would be able to do that. I didn't look at their testimony if they submitted some to know whether they had a concern about the deadline either.
Yes, they did. Yeah, thank you. They submitted as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Reiner. And let me ask my good co-chair if she has any questions.
Thank you. So I kind of understand that, when you're doing your audits, you're purely just looking at, the grants maybe made to nonprofits in whole. As part of your audit procedures, do you ever dig into like substantiate the work that's done by a nonprofit to receive their sort of grant or their funding from the state?
So is your question as it pertains to, well, the grants generally go through an agency. So whether it's a grant to a municipality to build a bridge, or a grant to go through an agency.
Yeah, so if you're giving if DDS is allocated funding for providing residential services, and some of those residential services are going to community nonprofits, as part of your audit procedures, are you looking at the work that those nonprofits are doing to substantiate the amounts that they receive as part of their DDS allotment? And then the same question goes for DSS, for the Medicaid side of things. Are the procedures the same to substantiate the work that's done, so that you might have those details as part of your audit procedures? Is that making sense or not?
It is. My review of what we have done regularly is that I've not read anything that makes a statement on whether we have substantiated whether the services that were provided at the dollar amount that they were paid are plus or minus better than they might have been or are from a similar state service or in relation to each other. I don't remember reading in a regular audit that there was some evaluation on whether or not the client outcome necessarily was what we expected. And that's generally, as I understand it, when we flip to performance audits. And in those particular cases, we have done some work, for instance, in the arena of special education. And so if we look at special education as the legislature is, and try and determine whether the outcomes for specific groups of people are the same across the state of Connecticut, if they're provided by the same provider, I think that work is in some ways ongoing and almost completed. If we look at that work and then want to evaluate whether or not what we're being charged for my child or your child or someone else's child by the same vendor for the same services, I can't say for certain whether we're there, but I can say that we've done some work in that arena. And so could we do that here? I would say that it could be done. I don't know whether what the outcome would be what the advocates accept as a reasonable determination, because I think to some degree it's in the eye of the beholder.
I'm just thinking back to my auditing days, and we would have review contracts with, the providers that provided services, whether they were or goods. And as part of the audit procedure, you would, one, does it agree, the contract agree to the amounts paid? So you're substantiating the payment, but then you're also substantiating the services that are contractual based on the relationship. And I guess I was kind of thinking that maybe within your scope of auditing one of the agencies, if you're looking at payments made to third parties for such services, that you are substantiating the contractual services that the nonprofits did as part of the work. And I guess so when I'm thinking about this bill and how you might be a good source for it, it is thinking that as part of your procedures that you're already doing when you audit DDS or other agencies, that you would have those sort of testing to substantiate payments, and then maybe be able to dig in and do like a limited procedures on nonprofit providers providing services for residential, so that it would be not too far off from your normal audit procedures.
At the risk of saying something I probably shouldn't say at this point in time, I would say that I do think we're open to a conversation about anything, from the language of the bill to what you might be thinking today or tomorrow. Anything that we can do to try and limit the scope, not necessarily to try and get away from some of the concerns that I heard today from people that testified, but to try and see if we can accomplish a task that provides good, valuable information, both to the advocates and to the legislature. We would certainly be willing to work with you on that. We do a lot of work in this arena. And so to expand that work in specific areas, with my limited knowledge, seems to be an easier task than to take out a blank sheet of paper and say, here, go do this. Because we could spend a lot of time developing graphs and charts on information that everyone here already knows, that knows anything about this population.
Yeah.
And if I could say, it's hard for me to remember forget my legislative history, but there are certain tasks that the legislature avoids because it's very difficult. And so when you talk about supplanting one population of employee for another, as I recall, when this conversation was had about 15 years ago, the hope was to be able to move in a direction through attrition. And then you always come down with a box. And today's box, as I heard in testimony today, is not the same size as the box was 5 years ago. And so it doesn't mean that the issues within the box have gone away. It just means it may be a smaller population. And so I still don't know, after you count all the numbers, what you would do with the information. What I could say is that if we do find some meaningful information that we can develop around whether the services, whether they're provided at the public side or private side, actually kind of hit the target, which is what you would hope. Is one doing it better than the other? Are they both doing it? And then the costs associated with doing it by each is different. We certainly would take a look at that.
So it
But,
sounds,
we either don't have the people to do it today. We could expand the scope within what we're currently doing, and there would be some expectation of a time delay because these agency reviews are generally on a 2-year cycle, not a 1-year cycle. So,
and I understood that a DDS audit was going on currently for 22 and 23, I think it was. So I was thinking we could coincide the two.
trying to catch that train.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been trying to do that for a year.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
hear-
I think we don't want to necessarily have to pay someone else to do the study, because I
We could
do
look at-
believe that these analyses are already being done by OPM and by your office as part of the regular biennial audit. So that was the sort of goal, but I think that's it for me. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Dathan. Do we have any other comments or questions? No, thank you very much, Mr. Minor, for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, is anyone else that's here that would like to testify for this public hearing? Okay, then we're gonna close this public hearing and we will open our.
Nope.
We're not gonna open. Yeah, we'll open
Yeah,
and
we
then take a
should
recess.
open and-
Yeah, okay, we're gonna close this this public hearing for now. So thank you. And then I'll turn it over to now chair of our committee meeting.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. This is the Tuesday, March 18th Government Oversight Committee. I am going to convene the committee meeting and immediately recess.